All right, so in this video, I want to hopefully illustrate and expound on some of the kind of more challenging and controversial ideas that I've presented and put out over the last 6 months or so, mainly being a bit critical and let's just say harsh on a lot of the ideas of the New Age kind of spiritual movement, being skeptical of people pushing psychedelics and plant medicines and all of this kind of things. And even in my videos saying that basically the hippie generation were more or less useful idiots to really create a process of degeneration and really overall moral decay and decline of our civilization and our culture. And I think where we are right now is an inflection point where our culture, at least in modern America and maybe much of the West, is in a pretty massive part of decline. Many of the indicators that showed up in previous cultures that fell apart are pretty prevalent right now as well. So I'm going to use some illustrations and some major tenets from the book Brave New World to illustrate exactly what I'm talking about and why I say those things, and also tie it into really how the world has changed with COVID and all these other things that have happened and I think are going to keep happening very likely. So I would say we can definitely focus primarily on the aspects of 2, 3, 4, and 5. So in terms of looking at useful idiots or hippie generation and new age people kind of bringing us down as a culture and making people more degenerated, we'll focus on number one, people focusing mostly exclusively on pleasure and basically avoiding pain, avoiding any kind of discomfort, and really getting on lots of different drugs, lots of different coping mechanisms, and constantly being stimulated. And I'm going to introduce these, and then I'll go back and kind of break them down a little bit more over time. The next one is the rejection of traditional values. And whether that be traditional religion, which oftentimes gets, rejected, thrown out, people getting broken away from their families because maybe they're not awakened or they're not conscious or whatever. And also just in terms of love and relationships, there's a massive trend towards polyamory and a massive breakdown in the overall the massive breakdown in the overall structure of our society, which was the family, which was kind of monogamous relationships. And just as an aside, randomly relating to what happened during COVID, and a lot of people aren't aware of this, but during COVID, when everyone was supposed to be locked down and social distancing and supposed to be at home and keeping apart from each other, there was coincidentally mass protests that somehow were exempt from all of the COVID policies, but whatever. And a lot of that was from BLM, right? Which basically all I want to talk about right now is how what people don't realize is the vast majority of what they were putting out had actually nothing to do with helping people of color in any way, shape, or form. Because when this whole thing was reaching its peak, I went to their actual website and read their actual mission statement, which I could tell no one had done, because it was all about breaking down the nuclear family, breaking down capitalism, breaking down basically all of the structures of our basic society. And then, there was a couple of lines about, social justice and equality for black people, but it was mixed in with all of this other stuff that was basically just Marxist chaos inducing kind of ideas. And even the leaders and founders of the organization were quoted in saying that they were trained Marxists. And the irony of that is, they're quite wealthy now, and they've been publicly buying like mansions and traveling on private jets. So that whole thing is kind of ironic. But I just kind of wanted to mention it because it's a great example of a social thing that on the surface sounds great. Obviously, yes, we all want social justice. We all want equality. None of us want to see the horrible things that we saw during that time frame, and we still do, obviously. But that is getting appropriated and exploited for profit, for gain, and to push other agendas that basically harm people. Like basically People were buying into this idea thinking it was going to be something amazing. But then if I go look at the cities where the protests and the rioting and stuff was happening, people lost jobs, people lost their businesses, and the overall economic viability of the area went down, which harms everyone because the cost of living goes up and people aren't able to get jobs and their overall infrastructure of their cities crumbles. So who pays for it? Us. Who profits from it? The people that we're allegedly protesting against. And something that people just don't realize, they don't think about. And I just say that because it illustrates a great example, just in the same way of what I was saying about hippies and the New Age movement, people pushing psychedelics and all these things. On the surface, yes, it sounds great. You're like, yeah, definitely. We want to, empower people and enhance consciousness and awareness and all these things. But then people never think about what that actually means, what that actually entails, and what the actual consequences of that will be, and who's actually pushing it and why they're pushing it, and probably how they're pushing it for profit and exploitation, which has been occurring historically for, I guess, as long as we can see history. It seems like things like this have been happening. So anyways, getting back to the point, culture of pleasure, rejection of traditional values, use of technology to control behavior and perception, and the sacrifice of individuality for perceived stability. Now, we could look at COVID. This absolutely pushed through many of these things. And we could spend hours breaking that down, but I'll focus on, I can think of one popular spiritual New Age authority who I would say has been pretty paramount in pushing some of these ideas. I won't name them, but they definitely push pleasure-seeking, polyamory, taking lots of drugs, being on TRT, being on a bunch of other, I can't remember what they're called at the moment, but different types of amino acids and different precursors and different things that you're shooting up, basically. And then they're pushing, ketamine and psychedelics and LSD and magic mushrooms and ayahuasca. So it's like I see videos of them over years, and they're pushing float tanks and meditation and DMT and ayahuasca and all this self-work and constant reflection and constant progress. And then after 10 years, they're like, yeah, I was super depleted and super wiped out, so I had to get on TRT and I'll shoot up all these other all these other substances, and I felt way better. But then I still realized I had all these problems, so then I had to start doing ketamine and smoking a bunch of weed. And it's like, at what point would someone doing all that stuff that obviously hasn't worked, hasn't produced the results, has caused more problems, chaos, and disorder, at what point would someone just be like, oh, maybe this is incorrect, maybe I'm wrong? But because they're conditioned to seek pleasure and avoid any degree of pain or discomfort, and get wrapped up in toxic positivity and all types of spiritual delusion and all of these things, and then caught up in the feedback loop of cult dynamics and the feedback loop that technology allows people to live in, which is kind of like a hyper normalization kind of thing, where your whole experience with technology is just reinforcing what you already think, feel, and believe. So you're just surrounded by people that think, feel, and believe exactly what you do, so they're just constantly validating you. So you exist in this comfort soup of drugs, breakdown of everything, but constant validation. So basically, you're really set up for just keep on repeating that stuff. And all the while, you're sacrificing your personal individuality and your personal wellness for some made up idea of greater good or greater progress, or ushering in a new consciousness, or ushering in, a new era, or some other salvational, naive, idealistic idea that people buy into, that they're sacrificing themselves for. So these are the main tenets from A Brave New World, and I would just encourage you to look at COVID, look at any of the other agendas that have been pushed over the last few years and currently are being pushed, and see how easily they fit into these categories. and then see how if you push back against it in any way, shape, or form, people shoot you down. Even conscious, awake, compassionate beings will shoot you down. Open-minded, alleged free thinkers shoot you down. Why? Because in actuality, they are useful idiots that have been usurped by these ideologies, usurped by these nefarious parties, and are basically just engendering chaos and disorder, making people more degenerate, making people more ineffective, more inefficient in actual functioning of human life. So all this is doing is reinforcing the first point, which is the rigid caste system, making the divide between people even greater. Which, if you think about economically speaking, what happened during COVID, basically the vast majority of the wealthy people on the planet got exponentially more wealthy, while everyone else got more poor. Then if you look at all the race riots and that stuff that happened, just divided people up even more. Then if you look at vaccine versus non-vaccine, divided people up even more. If you looked at even now the different gender things that are being pushed and the different identities and the different orientations, dividing people up more and more. And who does that benefit? It doesn't benefit us. It doesn't benefit the regular citizens. Even though we buy into it, or some people buy into it, thinking, oh, it's going to be good for me, and I'm going to sacrifice my individuality because I'm going to gain some stability or some belonging to some group. But in actuality, all it's doing is reinforcing the first point. It's making the rich richer, the more powerful, and making us peasants and us serfs more divided, more disempowered, more degenerate, more unhealthy, more impoverished. But we're doing it thinking it's good for us, which is the ultimate irony, which is the ultimate demonstration of the efficacy of the use of technology to control behavior. And this is equally applicable to all the COVID propaganda stuff that's pushed through and any other kind of agenda. Just the same thing as the spirituality, New Age, all this psychedelic stuff. And why I say that? Because what makes humans actually effective and efficient as humans is rarely, if ever, found in those actual genres. Because being an effective human being means you can think clearly, means you have an actual solid sense of identity, a solid sense of individuality. You can recognize false and true information. You can hear information and pull out, oh, this is the relevant detail. You can hear information and realize, oh, this is the implicit agenda or the embedded command that is in this thing, and I don't agree, or maybe I do, or whatever, but you're at least able to be aware of those things. And developing competency in something, developing skill in something, having some degree of actual power in your life, having an actual concept of some degree of meaning or purpose for yourself. These are the actual mechanics that make people functional and useful and helpful and competent in life, which is the exact opposite of all this kind of Brave New World 1984 stuff. But so I just wanted to kind of share a little bit more of context, because I think for a lot of people it's weird to be suspicious or critical of, I think for a lot of people, anything. But in this context specifically, people get very upset that I've had these opinions, views, and critiques of things like modern spirituality and New Age and all the whole thing going back to the 60s. And I can't tell you the amount of hatred and negativity and personal attacks and insults that I've received over the years as a result of those things. And again, that's what I'm saying now is stuff I've been saying since 2012, basically. Just maybe in slightly different angles and formats, but it's in general the same idea, because I just realized quite a while ago, mechanics are mechanics, results are results, and I think at a certain point we might need to actually look at those things and ask really basic, simple, straightforward questions. So anyways, thanks for watching. Hopefully that helps, and we'll talk to you soon.